Hi, I'm Jeanette Lim, Vice President for Legal Affairs in this group, CWI. It's been really powerful listening to Marcia, and especially the discussion about the executive order. I had thought, while I've been very, very much involved with Title IX, I wanted to share my executive order experience because I thought it would be so unique. Well, let me tell you a little bit about my Title IX experience and my connection to Bunny. The reference to the wheel litigation also reminded me of the Adams order, Adams litigation. This was against the Office for Civil Rights and the Department of Education to do their job, to implement Title IX, Title VI, Section 504. When I graduated from law school, I was hired as one of the Adams Order attorneys. Through the years, I worked on Title IX, wrote the first sexual harassment investigative guidance to our regional offices who were investigating the first complaint, which was in Utah at one of the universities there. As was mentioned before, the term sexual harassment in 1982 was unknown. Nobody knew what to call this, and everybody was confused because it had sex implications. But as we know, it wasn't sex, it was power, and it was intimidation. I had been an administrator at a university, and sexual harassment was sort of a standard that was accepted. And I was sexually harassed, not knowing exactly what it was, but realizing the intimidation, the power, the helplessness, needed my job. In any event, having worked on Title IX, I also spent some time at the Department of Justice. Seth was there. Worked on access to a public military college, the Citadel. So today I thought I would share my early experience as a feminist and how the executive order really influenced me, thinking it would be unique. I'm delighted that everybody else has a executive order story. I became a feminist in the 60s and 70s while struggling as a child raised in the 50s. I was a wife to a DuPont executive in Wilmington, Delaware, played duplicate bridge at the hotel every Thursday, made dinners, progressive dinners, remember those? Mm-hmm. But I had read Betty Friedan's The Feminine Mystique in the 60s. I read Fear of Flying by Erica Jong. I read Germaine Greer's The Female Eunuch, and there were seeds planted in this obedient Chinese-American wife of a traditional husband who was a DuPont executive. I had earned a degree from the University of Michigan in chemistry, a medical genetics degree from the University of Wisconsin, and all of a sudden I said, what am I doing? I miss my lab, I miss DNA research. And I got very involved in Delaware politics. Delaware's a small state, so you can really get involved very quickly. And I decided I wanted to go to law school and become a civil rights attorney. My husband was horrified, and having put him through his PhD, he wasn't going to help me. So I decided I would do it on my own, and I did. I decided I'd get a job. The University of Delaware was looking to hire somebody to implement an executive order. This was 1972, and that's when I first became aware of Bunny Sandler. The Executive Order 11246 had been passed in 1965, signed by John Lyndon Baines Johnson, providing requirements for contract compliance based on and non-discrimination and affirmative action based on race, color, national origin, religion, and maybe age. I'm not sure if it covered age. But 2 years later, sex was added under Executive Order 11375. You've heard all about that. And Bunny discovered this when she was horrified that there were no sex protections, gender protections against discrimination at higher education institutions. Title VII had not covered it yet in the 60s, and the Equal Pay Act had not covered it yet. She was doing research, and it was kind of fun to hear her talk about what she learned. She said that she had been reading the Executive Order 11246, and there was an asterisk, and the asterisk said that it had been amended to add sex. She decided to look at that and discovered Executive Order 11375. She and Wheel decided they want to file complaints against universities who, most universities receive numerous contracts, awards for research, and she and Wheel filed 150 complaints in the spring of 1970 against the whole California State University system, Columbia University, Harvard University, Loyola of Chicago, George Washington University, and numerous others. That's when the Department of Labor's Office of Contract Compliance, the OFCCP, was forced to develop an investigative process for investigating all these complaints. The results that dozens were denied federal funds because they failed to comply, and eventually all but 3 complied. So Bunny learned that this process of doing her work, as we've heard, doing her research, and deciding to file complaints was effective. And that's when I got my first job. The work at Delaware, as people were saying, uncovered for me many, many practices against women. In the field of chemistry, which I had a degree from the University of Michigan, they refused to hire this. After all, we were in Newark, Delaware, which is close to Wilmington, where DuPont was. Chemistry was a big department there. They refused to hire women because the women would shortly have babies, and they would leave, and they wouldn't be around. To say nothing of distracting the men. Right. That too. Right. It opened my eyes to so many practices. There was many of the young women were very bright and very smart. The men in their family, their brothers, were sent to the Ivy League. But the families couldn't afford 2 at the Ivy League, so most of the young women went to the State University, the University of Delaware. Consequently, admissions for women at the university had higher standards than for men. If that wasn't bad enough, if one of the young women happened to marry a young man who was from Pennsylvania or Maryland, she was no longer considered a Delaware resident and had to pay out of state. So these practices were part of what the executive order began to uncover and require affirmative action in hiring and in practices at the university. One final remembrance. I started working in May of 1972, a budding feminist, not really understanding what the rest of my life would be, which has been great under the tutelage of people like Bunny Sandler. That was the same month that the feminist-themed magazine, Ms., was first published. Gloria Steinem was the founder with Dorothy Pittman Hughes. The magazine was sold to the Feminist Majority Foundation in 2001, and Gloria Steinem remains on the masthead. Also in 1972, top of the Billboard song was I Am Woman by Helen Reddy. I am woman, hear me roar, in numbers too big to ignore. Thank you.